Hello and welcome to Before You Pull, where we show off the kits and details of upcoming characters, as well as some recommended teams and disc setups to help you plan your pulls. All of the following is from the creator server though, so things are still subject to change. As always, I am not your father. I cannot tell you if you should pull Yanagi or not. What I can do is provide you the details needed to help you decide yourself whether or not to pull for her. Yanagi is an electric anomaly unit from section 6, and her niche is to be an on-field damage dealer, triggering her very own specific forms of disorder. So ideally, you want to keep some form of anomaly on the enemy at all times. But let's start things off with Yanagi's core skill, as that's nice and easy to go over. When you have another anomaly or electric character, Yanagi's basic attacks will have increased anomaly buildup when she changes stances. More on that in just a second. As for her passive, after using her EX special attack, any disorder damage done by the team is increased, and Yanagi's own electric damage is also increased. At max rank, this is a 250% disorder increase and a 20% electric damage increase for Yanagi. Now though, let's go over her basic attacks. Firstly, there are two stances that Yanagi can be in. Each stance gives her a specific buff, and when switching, the previous buff will persist for 8 seconds. So ideally, you want to be juggling between the two stances every 8 seconds. You can see which state she is in currently by looking at the color of the talisman on her back. Blue is Jorgen, which gives her an electric damage increase of 10%, while orange is Kagen, which increases her penetration ratio by 10% as well. In both stances, her basic attack string consists of 5 hits, where the first 2 do physical damage and the next 3 do electric damage. Something to note though is that the multipliers for these attacks are different across the two stances. Her blue stance has higher electric attack multipliers, while the orange stance has higher physical attack multipliers. This will be important in just a second, so do remember this. I will say though, all of these basic attacks are very wide hitting. I mean, it makes sense, right? She has a Naginata, which is a very lengthy weapon, so it is very easy to group up and attack multiple enemies with her basic attacks. As for how you switch stances, there are multiple ways to do this. When you perform a chain attack or use the defensive assist to parry an attack, Yanagi will switch stances. Otherwise though, you can also switch stances using her special attack. By tapping the skill button, you will do a small little attack that changes your stance at will. However, if you tap the skill after the 3rd, 4th, or 5th hit of Yanagi's basic attack string, you do a much faster version of the switch attack. And you also block any enemy attacks during this switchover period. Kinda like Caesar and her parry on her skill. Although I will say, this is a little bit harder to pull off as it does have to be after a specific attack, and it can't really be done at will, as much as Caesar's can be done. As if you try and time this after a 3rd attack, you might end up waiting too long and then the attack string resets and you'd go back into the regular version, which is not a parry attack. Still though, it's a nice thing to have when it does happen. As for her EX special attack, you have to specifically hold down the skill button to use this when you have enough energy. If you just tap the button even with a full energy bar, you will still do a regular stance switch. But when you do use Yanagi's EX skill, first things first, Yanagi will pierce through the enemy, changing her stance, and also enter a new buffed state for 15 seconds called Shinra Bansho. In this state, Yanagi will basically skip the first 2 hits of her basic attack chain as long as you don't get interrupted by an enemy. And remember, those 2 first hits are only physical attacks. This means that you will be spending more time attacking with the electric hits of their basic attack string, which means more electric damage and also more anomaly buildup. But that is not all. After this thrust, Yanagi will then do a slam down, doing a chunk of electric damage, and also, if the enemy is affected by an anomaly during the slam down, a special disorder called Polarity Disorder will be triggered, which deals 15% of the original disorder's damage. And for those of you who don't know how disorder damage is calculated, basically this is effectively whatever damage the anomaly would have dealt if you were to let it do all of its ticks. So you get 15% of whatever damage would have been triggered as if it was a regular disorder, plus a very large multiplier based on Yanagi's anomaly proficiency. At skill level 1, this is 725% of Yanagi's anomaly proficiency, but at skill level 12, this is a whopping 3200% of Yanagi's anomaly proficiency. What's important though is that this special disorder does not remove whatever current anomaly is in place like a regular disorder would. So let's say an enemy is currently burning, you could get a double disorder proc back to back by hitting them with Yanagi's EX special to trigger the special disorder, which does not overwrite the burn, and then having the electric damage just done naturally trigger a regular disorder that overwrites the burn. And then for Yanagi's ultimate attack, it is your typical nuke attack, while also providing another chance for the special polarity disorder to trigger. So as mentioned, the typical playstyle that you want to do with Yanagi is to be constantly switching between her two stances. This is to keep up both the penetration buff as well as the electric damage buff. Personally, I like to try to stay in the blue state as that has the higher damage multipliers on her basic attacks, but the timings are all very nice. You use her EX skill to give you that 15-second buff where you are only using the electric attacks, and this of course does include switching a stance, and then after about halfway through this buff, after about 8 seconds, you then switch again manually, or you can just refresh the buff and trigger another disorder if you use her EX special skill to keep juggling these buffs. But of course, you only get that disorder proc if there is an anomaly currently applied to the enemy. But again, if you are in the buff state, I don't think there will be too much of an issue with trying to build up electric anomaly with Yanagi. Now though, moving over to her signature engine, the Time Weaver. This gives an attack percent increase as well as a 30% anomaly buildup for electric. And then when a special or EX special hits an enemy that has an anomaly applied to them currently, the equipper gets an anomaly proficiency increase of 75 at rank 1. And if the anomaly proficiency of this character is then over 375, which is very easy to do on anomaly characters, any disorder damage done by the wearer is increased by 25%. This of course applies to regular disorders as well as Yanagi's special disorder. Naturally, the engine is tailor-made for Yanagi, and honestly, it isn't too bad of a general usage engine as well for any other electric anomaly agent that wants to do disorders. Grace. But as always though, this engine is by no means necessary for Yanagi, but it will improve her damage if you use this over the alternatives such as Electro Lip Gloss or Weeping Gemini, both of which can work very well with Yanagi. Now for those of you who are daring enough to go for multiple copies of her, let's go over Yanagi's Mindscapes. Mindscape 1 allows Yanagi to gain a stack of clarity whenever an anomaly is afflicted, with a maximum of 3 stacks. Each stack provides 80 anomaly proficiency, and when hit, a stack is consumed, which also provides an invulnerability period, essentially allowing you to tank out a hit. Mindscape 2 increases the electric anomaly buildup of the piercing part of Yanagi's EX special and allows you to continue holding down the button to do more thrusts where you continuously pierce through the enemy before doing the downward plunge. Each additional thrust costs 10 energy, and once you do finish with that downward plunge that triggers the special disorder, it will now do 20% instead of the original 10% of the disorder damage. And for each additional thrust that you did, up to a maximum of 2, this multiplier is further increased by 15% per thrust. Mindscape 4 causes enemies to have 16% increased pen ratio applied to them when attacking once Yanagi inflicts any attribute anomaly damage to them. And lastly, Mindscape 6 increases the damage done by her EX special by 20%, as well as doubling the duration of the special enhanced state to 30 seconds. It also then halves the energy cost for those additional thrusts that you do from Mindscape 2, and it also allows you to stack 4 additional thrusts to boost the special disorder damage up to a maximum of 80% now instead of the original 10% at Mindscape 0. Now though, moving over to team compositions, there are a lot that work with Yanagi honestly. In the upcoming Shiyu defense, the buffs will obviously be favoring her, so it'll be easy to slot her into any team. But I think the one everyone is aware of is a disorder team with her and Bernice of course, with any support rounding out the team. I don't think it'd be too much of a stretch to say that pairing any 2 limited S ranks will do really well. This team does make it feel like a solo Yanagi where occasionally, every now and then, you just happen to get a burn application from Bernice, which lets you get an extra disorder proc in. Now you could use any other anomaly agent too of course, but they won't be as effective as Bernice. Not only will others want to hog field time, which means less time spent with Yanagi, but for Piper and Jane, they apply Assault, which does not do damage over time. Because of this, the disorder proc that is done just by regular disorders or Yanagi's special disorder will be less than if it was a burn proc that was being triggered. And as for Grace, a mono electric team can work too. It'll help keep the shock anomaly up for Thunder Metal, but since you are only using one anomaly type, you won't get any regular disorder procs. But again, even if you make a team that may not be the quote-unquote absolute best, I'm sure you will still be able to clear the toughest content for the most rewards. If you build the team around Yanagi, she will do just fine. As for her disc setup, it's a little dependent on what your team composition is like. In this gameplay, I was using a 4-piece Thunder Metal with 2-piece Chaos Jazz. Obviously, the extra anomaly proficiency from the 2-piece set is nice, but the 4-piece Thunder Metal provides 28% attack as long as the enemy is shocked, which should be fine since, like I said, Yanagi can keep shock up really well. And when the occasional burn from Bernice does overwrite the shock, she is able to quickly reapply it to get the attack increase again. Otherwise, another option is to use the 4-piece Chaos Jazz, which gives 15% electric damage, but only increases the assist and EX special damage. And also you have to be constantly switching in and out to reapply this buff, which you might be doing anyway though to switch to your other anomaly applier. Or her main stats, slot 4 naturally is anomaly proficiency, slot 5 is electric damage, and slot 6 I went with anomaly mastery, again to keep that shock applied as much as possible, although I can see an argument made for energy regen, for those that want an easier time keeping up Yanagi's enhanced state, which you only get from her EX skill, as well as the option to trigger these special disorders more often with a higher energy regen. But there you have it though, that is Tsukishiro Yanagi, the mother figure of Section 6. She is a very aggressive electric anomaly applier with very big AoE attacks. She can apply electric anomaly very easily with her constant barrage of enhanced attacks, and she can take advantage of the anomalies that do get applied by triggering her own special disorders for extra chunks of damage. Speaking for myself, I don't know if I will pull for Yanagi. I already have an anomaly team with Jane and Bernice. Even though Yanagi would technically be better, I'm sure I'll be able to manage just fine without her. But I will probably throw a few rolls here and there just to see if I get lucky. But let me know in the comments down below what your plans are. Will you be pulling for her? Otherwise, thank you all for watching. As always, if you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, liking, commenting and subscribing is greatly appreciated. And so until next time, bye bye.